Ever felt like the world could go on without you? And no one would even blink? That's where Maddie Ellsworth found herself at 74. Once an army nurse, once a mother. But time had stripped all that away. Her son was gone, lost to addiction. Her friends drifted, her savings stolen by a phone scam that took every last dime. With nothing left to hold on to, she wrote a note, zipped up her coat, and stepped into the Appalachian woods, planning never to return. But fate had a different ending in mind. Just as she was ready to end her life, something stopped her, something no one could have predicted. A Bigfoot. Not a storybook monster, not a blurry figure on some old VHS tape. A being of flesh, of instinct, and, impossibly, of mercy. It didn't speak. It didn't roar. It just stayed, watched, waited. And Maddie somehow began to feel seen again. This isn't folklore. The details come straight from a crumbling journal, buried inside a moldy canvas pouch at a long-abandoned ranger outpost. Every page, every mark traced back to Maddie's hand. I verified it all. What I uncovered was not just a story. It was a resurrection. What unfolded in that forest wasn't just survival. It was something deeper. A quiet, sacred exchange between two broken souls, one human, one not, finding warmth in the ashes of their pain. No dialogue, no explanations. Just a bond, built one gesture at a time. Maddie went on to start something remarkable. A refuge for forgotten elders. A place where no one would feel invisible again. A second chance born out of silence, shadow, and something wild. So if life's ever made you feel like a ghost, overlooked, unheard, this story is for you. You might not believe in Bigfoot, that's fine. But by the time this is over, you may start believing in second chances again. Now, let me show you what really happened out there. In the mist, under the pines, where the wild things still remember how to listen. I always thought I'd go out quiet. Just fade, like steam off the kettle, unnoticed, unneeded, unloved. But it didn't happen like that. It started with a phone call. It was mid-July, just past noon. The kind of still, sticky heat that makes your bones ache. My cabin sits halfway up Wellspring Ridge, tucked beneath a canopy of aging pines and creaking oaks. On a day like that, the air don't move. No breeze, no bird song, just the slow ticking of the kitchen clock and the hum of flies outside the screen door. I was crocheting, well, pretending to. My hands have gotten stiff lately. Arthur, the arthritis, came to stay and never left. I had the radio low, just some AM preacher out of Asheville talking about fire and brimstone. I wasn't really listening. My mind was where it always goes these days. Back to Richard, my husband. Back to Michael, my boy. Both of them long gone. One from cancer, one from a needle. The kind of silence that follows a loss like that, it ain't quiet. It screams at you. Then the phone rang. The landline jolted me. Nobody calls that number anymore. Folks in town stopped checking in years ago. My sister passed. My friends either gone or tucked into homes where everything smells like bleach and forgotten birthdays. Miss Ellsworth, the voice said. This is the Social Security office. We've detected some suspicious activity on your account. The man sounded real official. Polite, soft-spoken. Not young, not old. Just invisible. Like someone who belonged behind a desk. I don't remember much of the words after that. I remember the way he spoke, steady, kind, like he was doing me a favor. He asked for my card number, said they needed to verify my identity. He used words like fraud, security hold, and reinstatement. My mind was moving slow that day. I'd skipped breakfast. My hip was hurting. I told him everything after I hung up. I sat there holding the phone, the dial tone buzzing in my ear like a fly stuck in a jar, and I felt stupid, but not yet scared, just tired, real tired. 3 days later, I walked into the Wellspring Credit Union with my grocery list in one hand and my checkbook in the other. I needed eggs, coffee, and canned peaches. What I got instead was a young teller who looked like he wasn't even old enough to shave, saying words that shattered me right there in front of God and everyone. "Your account's empty, ma'am. Drained. You authorized a transfer last week." I told him I didn't. I never signed anything. He clicked away at his keyboard like I was a problem to solve. "Says here you e-signed. Timestamp and IP address match. We have it on file." I said I don't even own a computer. He just stared at me, blinked once, said he was sorry. I left the bank without my peaches. The walk home felt longer than usual. My legs ached, but my chest... God, my chest felt like it had been cored out with a dull spoon. 43 years of savings. Every penny I tucked away since I first wore scrubs in Nam. Money for winter propane, for vet bills if a stray dog ever wandered up, for new tires when the ones on my truck went bald. Gone. I didn't tell a soul. Who would I tell? Sheriff Colton? He still thinks I'm the crazy old war widow who talks to trees. I thought about calling the fraud line, but what's the point when the world already decided you're obsolete? So I sat, night after night, staring at the frame on the mantel. Me and Richard on our wedding day, black and white, smiling like we didn't know the world could break us. I stopped turning on the lights, didn't pay the electric bill, sat in the dark, sipping tap water, listening to the trees groan like old men. I tried to pray, once, but the words didn't come, not even tears, just this dull throb behind my ribs, like my heart was filing for divorce. The day I wrote the letter, the sky was that sickly blue-gray, like it couldn't decide whether to cry or scorch the earth. I used the old stationery Richard gave me for our 20th anniversary, the one with the mountain scene on the top. I wrote his name, Richard Ellsworth. Slowly, like saying it might summon him. The words came easy after that. "Richard, I'm tired. I tried. I really did. But I've got nothing left. No one needs me. The world's not the same, and I don't belong in it. I'm sorry." I folded it twice, slid it under the family Bible. That way, if someone ever did come looking, they'd find it. Maybe they'd understand. Maybe they wouldn't. I packed light, my canteen, the Army-issued wool blanket he kept in the truck. One picture, me and Michael when he was 6, holding a frog in each hand. He was still mine then, still clean, still laughing. I lit the old oil lamp, the one from my mama's kitchen, and stepped off the porch. The woods swallowed me. It's funny. I'd walked that trail 100 times, maybe more. But that night it felt different. The trees leaned in closer. The wind didn't whisper. It howled, low and slow, like it knew where I was going and didn't approve. My boots slipped on the wet leaves. Thunder cracked somewhere above me, but I didn't stop. I had one place in mind, the Overlook. The one Richard and I used to camp at before the war took half his lungs. It was still there, I hoped. A flat stretch of rock that jutted out just enough to see the whole damn valley light up when the sun came up. I figured that was a good place to end things. Halfway up the ridge, the rain started. Cold, hard, relentless. Like it wanted to wash me clean before the end. My coat clung to my shoulders. The oil lamp flickered, then died. I slipped once. My knee hit a root. But I didn't stop. By the time I reached the clearing, I was shaking so bad I could barely breathe. The wind ripped at me. My hands were blue. The edge of the cliff was slick. The moss turned to slime. I took one step forward, then another. I closed my eyes, tried to hear Richard's voice, tried to remember the lullaby I used to hum to Michael when he couldn't sleep. My foot slipped. There was a sharp crack, then nothing, darkness, silence. But I didn't die. Not yet. Because somewhere in that void, somewhere between the place where breath ends and the next world begins, I saw something. Something enormous, covered in hair, shadow in shape, and something not quite human. It didn't move, just stood there, watching. Its eyes weren't cruel, weren't kind either, just old, deep. Then everything went black. When I woke up, I wasn't on the cliff. I wasn't dead. I wasn't even cold. I was in a cave, dry, safe. My head throbbed like hell, and someone, or something, had pressed wet leaves against the wound. A fire glowed low nearby. The smell of pine, moss, and something earthy filled the air, and the water. There was a wooden bowl beside me, full. I sat up slowly. No one spoke, but I knew I wasn't alone. There was a presence just outside the light, watching, not threatening, not friendly, just there. And I remember thinking one thing over and over again. Why? Why the hell would you save me? I wasn't worth saving. Was I? The first thing I felt was the smell. Damp pine, cold earth, wood smoke, and something bittersweet, like crushed wild mint. Then came the ache in my head, blooming slow like an old bruise waking up. I tried to sit up, but the weight of my own body was too much. My fingertips brushed stone, smooth, dry. Not rain-soaked like the forest floor should have been. That was the second thing. I wasn't cold. I wasn't wet. Somehow, I was warm. I blinked, slow. The world around me was orange and gray. Firelight danced against cave walls. Flickers, shadows like old hands reaching across stone. I saw the bowl first. A wide, carved thing, shallow, filled with water that shimmered like glass. Beside it, a folded piece of hide, something damp pressed to my forehead. My lips were cracked. My chest burned from breathing too fast. That's when it hit me. This wasn't heaven. And if it wasn't heaven, then something or someone had carried me here. I wasn't alone. The cave was wide but low. Smoke clung to the air like a whisper, rising soft and straight up through a narrow gap in the ceiling. Moss hung down from the cracks. There was no sound but the quiet pop of fire. No wind, no birds, no bugs. Just a silence so heavy I could hear the blood behind my eyes. I tried to speak. Nothing came out but a croak. Then I saw it, or her, standing right at the mouth of the cave, half shadowed by the fading light outside. Broad shoulders, long limbs, covered in dark, reddish hair that caught the firelight like old cedar bark. She was taller than any man I'd ever met. Maybe 8 feet, maybe more. Not hunched, not crawling, standing upright like something ancient that had never once had to bow. She didn't move, just stood there watching. And I swear to you, I didn't feel fear. Not right away. What I felt first was disbelief, like my mind was trying to make sense of something it wasn't built for. I wasn't sure if I was dreaming, or dead, or broken in the head. All I knew was those eyes. Deep, dark, unreadable. Not animal, not human. Just old, like they'd seen too many winters. She stepped back before I could speak. Gone. Left me sitting there shaking, half drunk on confusion and blood loss, with nothing but fire and silence for company. I don't know how long I laid there. The light outside faded to blue, then black. The flames softened. My body stayed warm. I slept like a child curled in a memory. When I woke again, there were berries beside me, a small bundle of them, wrapped in leaves. They were tart, red, wild. I ate every one. And then I cried. Not loud, not messy, just tears sliding down skin that hadn't felt cared for in too long. I wasn't supposed to be here. I was supposed to be dead. A name on the obituary page, a passing line folks would cluck tongues over before flipping to the crossword. But instead, I was alive. Because something had saved me. Something the world didn't believe in. Something I'd probably laughed at once, years ago, when folks talked about hairy women in the woods, or mountain guardians. But now I couldn't laugh, because her hands had bandaged my wound, because her cave had kept me warm, because she hadn't killed me, though she could have broken me in half like dry kindling. I waited for her. I don't know why. Maybe because she was the first living thing that hadn't looked through me in years. Or maybe because some part of me, some child deep part, still believed in miracles, even if they came wrapped in fur. But she didn't return that night. I drank from the bowl. carefully, ate the last berry. I crawled toward the cave entrance, my legs stiff and groaning. Outside, the trees bent low with moisture. The rain had stopped, but the forest floor was soaked. Mist clung to the roots like spider webs. I made it to the edge, looked out, and saw nothing but green. The overlook was down the ridge, just beyond a clearing. I could still see the ledge where I'd fallen. My footprints were gone, washed away by the storm. I stood there a long time, trying to make sense of it all. The woods had always been familiar to me. Like an old quilt I knew every stitch of. But now, they breathed different, lived different, like they were watching. When I turned back, there she was, not close, maybe 40 feet away, standing just at the edge of the clearing, motionless, arms at her sides. The wind barely touched her. She blended with the trees like she belonged more to them than to air or earth. I froze. So did she. I raised my hand. Slow, just a gesture, not a threat. She didn't move. I tried to say thank you, but my voice cracked in my throat. So I did the only thing I could. I sat down, right there on a wet stone, and I nodded. A slow, grateful nod. She stepped back into the woods without a sound. Gone. I don't know why I did what I did next. Maybe it was madness, maybe instinct. But I crawled back into that cave and waited. The fire was still warm, the leaves still soft. I curled up in that blanket like a child in church and whispered to no one at all. Why? Why would you save me? Why would you care? I'm just an old woman with no family, no money, no future. I came out here to end it all, to fade, to let go. But you didn't let me. You carried me, cleaned me, fed me. Why? The fire crackled softly in the dark. Outside, I heard a single branch snap, a bird call, then silence. And then, somewhere deep in those woods, far beyond what I could see, a sound. Not human, not animal, something in between. I listened, heart pounding, and I knew I was not alone, not anymore. And whatever she was, she hadn't finished with me yet. There's a certain silence in the woods that doesn't feel empty. It hums, breathing under the moss, curling around the bark, holding old secrets close. I'd been listening to that kind of silence for days now. I didn't count them, not exactly, but the sun had come and gone enough times for me to feel less like a visitor in that cave, and more like something kept alive, kept warm, kept known. I didn't see her much, just glimpses, movement at the edge of sight. The sound of weight shifting on wet leaves, a shadow against the tree line when the moon was thin and the firelight low. But I knew she was there. I could feel her the way you feel a storm coming in your joints. Not loud, not close, but present. She brought food. Quiet offerings left just beyond the cave mouth. Wild pears, clusters of berries wrapped in big leaves. Sometimes even a rabbit, skinned and smoked, smelling like hickory. I never saw her deliver them. I'd turn my back for a moment and they'd be there. Like she wanted to help, but not be seen doing it. Like she was making sure I could stay without asking me to. It should have scared me more than it did. But I'd passed fear a long time ago. I was something else now. Something like stillness. Something like surrender. One morning, maybe the 6th, maybe the 10th, I woke to the smell of pine ash and sweet dirt, and something bitter brewing in my mind. I sat up slow, my joints groaning in rhythm, and felt it sitting there in my chest, like a bell waiting to ring. Richard used to say, "Never drink coffee alone, Maddie. That's when the ghosts come." I remember the first time he said it. Cold morning, mid-March. Some army tent in the jungle with rain pouring like war drums outside. We were both 21, soaked to the bone, half-starved and scared. He'd brewed that awful, grainy black sludge in a rusted tin pot and handed me the first cup like it was an offering to God. We didn't talk. We just sat there, breathing steam, our knees touching in the dark. That cup tasted like home, even though we hadn't built one yet. I missed that. Not the coffee itself, but the ritual, the sharing, the quiet companionship. So I did something maybe a little crazy. I took the old canteen from my pack, filled it with rainwater I'd been boiling each morning, and set it to heat again over the fire. I rummaged through my satchel, pulled out the last bit of instant coffee from a camping tin I'd forgotten was still in there. Dusty, sure. Stale, probably. But it would do. I found Richard's old tin mug tucked in the side pocket, still dented from when he dropped it down a ravine in '73. I made 2 cups. Mine I held in my hands to warm my fingers. The other I set out just past the mouth of the cave, on a flat stone she'd placed there days ago with a few berries once. I set the mug down slow, like I was leaving flowers on a grave. Then I stepped back inside. I didn't look out. I didn't wait. I just sat, sipped my coffee, hummed Amazing Grace to no one. Next morning, the mug was gone. No, it was there, but different. Empty. Not a drop left, but cleaned. Not just rinsed. Polished. Shining like someone had taken time with it. Like it mattered. I felt something catch in my chest. Not fear, not surprise. It was something quieter. Something old and raw. Gratitude, maybe. Or the beginning of trust. I smiled. I don't remember the last time I'd smiled without forcing it. It felt foreign on my face. But it stayed. That afternoon I brewed again. Same way, 2 cups. I left the second one in the same spot. And that night, I didn't sleep. I stayed up, sitting by the cave entrance, watching. She came, not close, maybe 20 feet away. She moved slow, like water in a stream, heavy but silent. Her head turned toward me, just slightly. I didn't flinch. I didn't speak. I just sat there, one hand on my mug, the other in my lap. She crouched, thick limbs bending with a grace that surprised me. Picked up the cup with both hands, not like an animal, like a person. With care, with ritual. She raised it to her lips, drank, and I wept. Not because I was afraid, not even because I was in awe, but because in that moment I wasn't alone. She sat there for a while after, just holding the cup. Then set it down gently. The handle turned toward me. A small nod, not exaggerated, not performative. Just enough. Then she stood and stepped back into the woods. I picked up the mug, still warm, still carrying the faint scent of cedar and something human. That's when I started talking to her. Not with words she'd answer, not expecting replies, just offering stories, bits and pieces. I'd sit by the fire and tell her about Richard, about how he used to laugh with his whole chest, about how the cancer took his voice before it took his body. I told her about Michael, my son, how he was all legs and eyes when he was little, how he loved frogs and baseball cards and calling me Mama, like it was the safest word in the world. I told her about how I failed him, how I didn't see it coming, how I still wake up hearing him cry, even though he's been gone 20 years. I told her about the world, about how people forget you when you get old, how neighbors wave but don't stop, how banks drain your soul and call it protocol, how silence wraps itself around your ribs and squeezes until you don't remember why you were ever worth anything at all. She listened, not with ears maybe, but with presence, with stillness. Over the days, she came closer. Never more than 10, maybe 15 feet away, never sudden, always steady. I started calling her Cedar Woman because of the way she smelled, like old trees and warm sap, like something rooted. She never spoke, but once, when I hummed a hymn, just low and slow, from the back of my throat, she tilted her head. A little nod, a soft sway, almost like she knew it, almost like it hurt her too. The more I talked, the less hollow I felt. Like words were bones knitting back together. Like the silence I'd been drowning in was finally letting go. And in those long quiet hours between dusk and dawn, something unspoken passed between us. Not friendship, not exactly, but something just as rare. Recognition. I stopped asking why she saved me. I started wondering what she'd lost too. And somehow, I knew the forest hadn't forgotten her, just like it hadn't forgotten me. That night I brewed a third cup, just in case. The fog hung heavy that morning, curled around the trunks like old arms, draping the forest in a silence so thick it felt holy. My bones were stiff from sleep, and my back ached from the hard stone I'd made my bed. But there was a strange peace in me, like my body remembered something my mind hadn't caught up to yet. Something older than grief, deeper than logic. I stretched slow and stepped out into the soft dawn light, breathing in the scent of moss and pine and smoke still clinging to my blanket. I needed to walk, to feel the earth move under me again. My legs weren't strong, not yet, but they remembered the trail. I wrapped myself in Richard's blanket and followed the slope south, past the tree with the broken limb where I once saw her watching. It felt like sacred ground now. I didn't look for her. I knew better. She came and went on her own time. The woods, it seemed, answered to her more than me. And still, every twig that snapped made my heart catch, like a child hoping to spot Santa after midnight. That's when I saw it again, or rather, remembered it. A clearing about a half-mile down, where the trees pulled back like curtains opening on an old memory. The path curved just right, and the rocks flattened into a kind of plateau. And there it was, the old shack, or what was left of it. Half collapsed, roof caved in, vines crawling up its sides like time itself was trying to pull it under. Richard and I built that place during our second summer together. Not big, not proper. Just a lean-to with a stove and 2 creaky cots. We called it Camp Mercy, a name he carved into the frame with his army knife, right above the door. It was where we'd come when the world got too loud, when his coughing got worse, when we didn't want to see anyone, or be seen. Now the door was hanging by one hinge, and the wind whistled through a hole where the window used to be. But it was still standing, like it had waited for me. I don't know what came over me, but I stepped inside. The air was stale with rot and soot. Mice had made homes in the corners. Leaves crunched beneath my feet, but under all that ruin, I could still smell him. Just a trace. Tobacco, cedar oil, that damn peppermint lotion he used for his joints. I got to work. I swept out the leaves with a branch, patched the roof with pine boughs, cleared out the stovepipe and relit the hearth with coals I'd carried from the cave. My hands bled a little. My knees barked every time I bent, but something deeper than pain kept me going. I was making room. For what, I wasn't sure yet. That evening, I dug through my little pack and pulled out the bag of root vegetables she'd left me. Tough little potatoes, wild onions, something that might have been a turnip. I boiled them all in a rusty pot, added salt I'd tucked in my coat pocket. The smell rose thick and warm, like something out of a better time. I made 2 bowls. Mine I ate slow, sitting by the fire. The second I placed outside on the stoop. No grand gesture, just left it there like the coffee. Like a prayer, night fell slow. I sat by the window, wrapped in the blanket, fire crackling low. I didn't sleep, not fully, just drifted between the kind of half-dreams you get when you're waiting for something and don't know what. Sometime after midnight, the room changed. I didn't hear her. I felt her. A shift in the air, a weight in the floorboards, the scent of cedar and earth and fire smoke, sharp and ancient. My eyes opened to a faint orange glow. The hearth fire had flared, and there she was, crouched low beside it, breathing, blowing on the coals with a kind of reverence, like tending to something sacred. She was so close I could see the steam rising off her shoulders, her back curved, muscles twitching under layers of matted hair. Her hands, God, her hands were enormous, but careful, intentional. She didn't touch a thing she didn't mean to. Her breath caught the fire, brought it back to life. She didn't look at me. I didn't move. Then, just like that, she rose, turned, stepped outside, gone. The room was still warm. I sat there shaking, heart pounding in my chest like a drum made of bone and memory. I didn't feel fear, I felt seen. Morning came gray and wet. The wind brought the smell of rain. I opened the door to find the bowl licked clean, just like the mug. And something else. Sitting on the porch was a gift, a branch. Smooth, long, whittled down on one end, the other bent like a bow. On its surface, carved careful and deep, was a symbol I didn't know the name for, but my gut knew what it meant. A wolf biting its own tail, a circle, a cycle. I held it in both hands. It was warm, and I wept again, not out of sadness, but because it had been so long since someone gave me anything with meaning. She didn't owe me anything, but she'd come anyway, into my space, my past. Sat by my fire like she'd belonged there all along. I spent the next days working that little shack into something close to a home. Not perfect, not safe, but real. I made curtains from an old flannel shirt. I lined the shelves with stones I liked the shape of. I sang to the walls while I cooked, humming old hymns and gospel verses until the echoes felt like company. She didn't come every night, but when she did, I'd find signs. Ashes stirred in the hearth, a wet footprint on the floor. One time, I found a single feather, dark, long, iridescent, tucked under the corner of my blanket, like she was saying, "I see you, I know you're trying, keep going." And I did, because for the first time in years I wasn't just surviving, I was making space for something, for someone. The woods weren't just woods anymore. They were alive, watching, waiting, and so was I. Because deep down I knew, this story wasn't done yet, not even close. There was blood on the leaves. That's what I saw first. Just a dark smear across the edge of a fern, barely catching the fading light. I thought maybe I imagined it, but then there was more. Drops scattered across the forest floor like beads from a broken necklace, soaking into the soil. My stomach twisted, low and sharp. I felt it before I understood it. Something was wrong. The air had changed, too. It was heavier, charged. The way it gets right before lightning hits, when every part of you tenses like it knows what's coming. I followed the trail slow, knees cracking, heart pounding so loud it drowned out the birds. They'd gone quiet, the birds. No chirps, no flutters. Just this eerie stillness, broken only by the whisper of branches moving above me, like the trees were holding their breath. Then I heard it, a cry, faint, not human, but not human. It came from deeper in the grove, behind the ridge where the water pools and the bramble grows thick. I pushed through the brush, thorns grabbing at my coat, a root catching my boot hard enough to make me stumble. I didn't stop, couldn't. That sound, it cut something open in me. Then I saw her, cedar woman. She was down on her side, halfway wedged between two trees, her leg twisted unnaturally behind her. A metal trap clamped around her ankle, teeth sunk deep into muscle. Blood, dark and slow-moving, coated the leaves beneath her. Her breath came in bursts, rough, hoarse. Her massive chest heaved with effort, but her eyes were open. Not wild, not even in pain, not the way most things would look. She just looked tired, like the weight of it all had finally caught up. I froze. Part of me wanted to run, not from her, but from the sight of her like that. Vulnerable, breakable. But I didn't run. I dropped to my knees. My hands shook as I fumbled for the hatchet I'd tied to my belt days ago, more for the feeling of safety than the actual use. I'd never cut through anything more serious than firewood in years, but I gripped the handle tight and slid it under the chain. I whispered, not words, not prayers, just sound, low and steady, like the songs my mama used to hum when I had a fever. She didn't fight me. She just watched. I brought the hatchet down once, twice. The metal groaned, then snapped. The tension in the chain broke with a jolt, and her legs slumped free. Blood poured fresh and thick. I tore the flannel from around my waist, wrapped it tight around her calf, pressing down to stop the flow. Still, she didn't move. Her eyes never left mine. There was something in them I hadn't seen before. Not fear, not trust, either. Something in between. Something like, understanding. Might not be pretty, I muttered, but it'll hold. I don't know if she understood the words, but she blinked slow. One long breath in, one out. We sat there in the dirt a while, just breathing. I wiped the sweat from my brow, felt the sting of old cuts reopening in my palms. My body ached, my back screamed, but I didn't care. All I saw was her, this creature I didn't even have a name for, bleeding into the same dirt I'd once thought would take me, and I felt this deep pull inside, this reckoning. She'd saved me. Now it was my turn. I fashioned a crude splint from 2 branches and tied it to her leg with strips of my coat. I didn't ask if she could walk. I just braced myself under her arm and started leading her back toward Camp Mercy. It took hours. She leaned on me, slow and quiet, her weight staggering but steady. I stumbled more than once. At one point, I nearly fell flat into the mud. She caught me, didn't say a word, just steadied me with one arm the size of my whole torso. The forest seemed to open for us. The path back was clearer than I remembered, like the land itself was helping. By the time we reached the shack, the sky had turned to ash, soft grays melting into each other like a bruise. I helped her inside, lowered her down onto a bed of pine boughs I'd laid out by the fire. Her breathing slowed. Her hands, though stained with dirt and blood, were gentle as they settled onto her chest. I sat beside her, took out what little herbs I'd gathered over the last week, yarrow, plantain, a bit of golden seal, and mashed them into a paste with some boiled water. Applied it to the wound, cleaned around it best I could. She didn't flinch, didn't groan, just closed her eyes like the pain had become something familiar. Afterward, I sat back on the floor and watched the fire climb higher. Outside, the wind began to howl, and I realized I'd never heard it sound like that before. Like mourning, like warning. Then it hit me. The trap. It wasn't random. Somebody had set it. Somebody was out here. I felt the chills sink into my gut like a nail. Folks didn't usually come this far off trail unless they had a reason. And if they were hunting something as big as Cedar Woman, they sure as hell weren't amateurs. I leaned in, stoked the fire, added another log. She stirred, her fingers curling just slightly. "It's all right," I whispered. "You're safe here." She didn't answer, but she didn't leave either. That night, I sat awake while she slept, every creak of the trees and crack of the fire sounding louder than usual. I listened for boots, for voices, for signs that the world I'd left behind had come looking. But the forest held, and in that little shack, with the fire between us, something shifted. She wasn't just a figure in the woods anymore. She was someone I'd bled for, and in the glow of the firelight, I saw something else. Not in her, but beside her. A shape, small, almost hidden. It stood just beyond the edge of light, where the shadows grew thickest. A figure, no taller than my hip, covered in thinner hair, arms tucked close to its chest, eyes wide and wet. A child, her child. Before I could speak, it darted back into the woods, vanishing between the trees. She stirred again, tried to rise. "Shh," I whispered. "Rest, they'll come back." But inside, I knew it too. The story had changed, and now it was about more than just the two of us. Nights felt longer after the trap. Longer and quieter. Not in the peaceful way they used to. Not like the hush of snow blanketing the trees or the steady rhythm of crickets just past dusk. This quiet had teeth. It pressed against the walls of the shack and slid under the door like cold air, reminding me over and over that something had changed, that things had been touched, that something wild had bled here. She didn't leave after that night. Cedar Woman stayed, laid low on a bed of pine boughs near the fire, her injured leg wrapped tight in bandages I redressed every morning and again each night. She barely moved, save for a shift of breath or a twitch in her big shoulders. But her eyes followed me. Every step, every breath I took around that room, I felt her watching me. Not out of fear, not even curiosity, just presence, solid and constant. I turned the shack into a little care station, dug a trench out back for waste, boiled water non-stop to keep things clean, re-sterilized my old sewing needle with alcohol when the wound needed re-stitching. At night, I'd talk to her like she was family, or maybe something older than that. Told her about the time I almost burned the house down trying to fry chicken for the church potluck. Told her how Richard used to snore loud enough to shake a rafter. How Michael once brought home a baby raccoon and begged me to keep it like a stray cat. I'd tell her things I hadn't said out loud in decades, things I didn't even know I remembered until they were already out, hanging between us in the orange flicker of firelight. She never spoke, but she listened. I could feel it in my bones. One night I handed her the tin mug like I always did, filled halfway with warm water and a few drops of birch bark tincture. I had to guide her hands to it, her fingers still stiff with healing. But she took it, held it like something delicate, studied it for a long moment before raising it to her lips. She drank like a person, slowly, carefully, both hands on the mug like it might slip. Then she set it down on the floorboards and looked at me. Her head dipped, not a nod, more like acknowledgement. That was the first time I cried in front of her. Didn't mean to. Just hit me all at once. The weight of being seen, of being needed. After years of emptiness, I was back in a room where my presence mattered. I turned away, but she reached out. Her hand brushed mine, just barely. Big, warm, coarse with years of wilderness. And still, tender. I didn't pull away. I whispered, I couldn't save my son. She didn't move. I tried, you know? I tried everything. Rehab, church, even locking him in his room once. But the drugs, they crawled in deeper than I could reach. He died in my arms, shaking, eyes rolled back. I remember the sound he made when he stopped breathing. I still hear it, at night, sometimes in the wind. Her hand stayed on mine. You saved me. I won't let you die here. I won't. The fire popped softly. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the tin roof like it was chewing something in its teeth. I stayed awake that night, sat beside her as she slept, hands still wrapped around mine, her chest rising slow and steady, her breath like the tide. The next morning, I found tracks outside the shack. Not hers. These were boot prints, wide, heavy, multiple. Men, hunters. They'd come through during the night. Maybe scoping. Maybe tracking. I buried the prints best I could, then camouflaged the clearing with deadfall and brush, pulling branches across the trail, scattering pine needles to mask our smell. The kind of tricks you pick up in wartime. The kind you hope you never have to use again. She didn't say anything when I came back, but her eyes met mine. She knew. That evening, I cooked soup with wild greens and boiled root veg, crushing in the last of the garlic I'd tucked into my sock back when I still thought I'd never come out of these woods alive. I ladled 2 bowls, sat beside her and handed one over. She took it, held it in both hands, raised it to her mouth. Steam kissed her face, her eyes fluttered shut, and for one moment, the shack felt like a home. I started singing. Quiet, rough. A version of Go Rest High on That Mountain I'd heard at a funeral years ago. Didn't mean to, just came out of me like water breaking through a dam. She listened, her big shoulders still, her breath even, and then the door creaked. I turned fast, bowl nearly tipped. There, just outside the doorframe, right beyond the edge of the light, stood the child. Same one I'd seen that night in the trees. Small, thin, fur lighter in color, almost patchy. Arms skinny and bent at awkward angles. Head low. Eyes too big for its face. Watching, I didn't move. She did. Cedar Woman shifted, groaning low, struggling to sit up. She reached one hand toward the doorway, palm open. The child took one step back, then another, eyes wide. Then it ran. I heard its bare feet slap against the wet ground. The sound faded into the woods. She collapsed back, chest heaving. Mama, I whispered. That's your baby, isn't it? She didn't look at me. Didn't have to. I saw it written across every part of her. The ache, the longing, the guilt. I sat there for hours after she fell asleep, staring at the door, hoping the child would return. that it would see her safe and come back. I thought of Michael, how he used to curl into my lap even after he turned 12, how he'd whisper, "Don't let go," when the nightmares came. "Mothers don't leave," I whispered to the empty room. "Not for long, not if they're still breathing." The fire cracked. She stirred, and I swore, right then and there, I'd find that child. If it took every last step these legs had left, I'd bring it back. Because mothers don't abandon. Not in these woods. Not anymore. The morning she disappeared, the forest felt different. I woke to silence so pure it rang in my ears. No wind, no rustling. Even the fire had burned down without a single pop. Just a faint orange glow and the smell of smoke clinging to the rafters. I sat up slow, my back stiff, heart already thudding in that hollow way it does when you know something's wrong before your brain catches up. The spot where she slept was empty. Blanket still warm, I checked the trail outside. No blood, no sign of a struggle, no crushed brush or broken branches. Just gone. Like she'd folded herself back into the woods before sunrise, leaving the fire, the shack, and me behind, like footprints that don't last in snow. I called for her once, just once. Not loud, not desperate, just enough for the name to leave my mouth, even though she never told it to me. She didn't come. Not that hour, not that day, not the next. It had been weeks since the trap. The wound had closed, but the limp stayed. I didn't think she was strong enough to go far. I told myself she'd come back, that maybe the child had returned, that maybe she'd gone to find them. But the longer I waited, the heavier the truth got. She hadn't gone for a walk. She'd left. I stayed. For 2 more days. Cooked soup, cleaned the floor, replaced the firewood. I left her mug out every night, filled with warm water and birch. And every morning, I found it untouched. On the 3rd day, I stepped outside at dawn. The air was cold and sharp, like it had been scraped clean overnight. The shack looked different in that light, smaller somehow, quieter. I sat on the stoop, rubbed my knees, and thought of Richard. Thought of Michael. Thought of the ache of watching someone walk away without goodbye. Then I saw it, a small branch, leaning against the doorframe like it had been placed there with care. Not dropped, not blown in. The bark had been peeled back, smooth and pale. On its surface, carved clean and deep, was a shape I had to run my fingers over twice just to believe. 2 hands, one larger than the other, intertwined. No words, no symbols. Just that image. I don't remember falling to my knees. I only remember the way the earth felt under them. Damp, alive. I pressed my palm to the carving and closed my eyes. She'd said goodbye, in her own way. That was the morning I packed. I wrapped the blanket around my shoulders, strapped my old boots tight, tucked the branch in with the few things I had left. I made one last circle around the shack, slow, touching the walls, the hearth, the window where she once breathed life into the fire like it was something she loved. Then I walked, took the long way down the ridge, let my legs ache, let the cold air bite my face. I wanted to feel it all, the weight, the sting, the goodbyes stitched into the trees. I passed the overlook, the one I almost left this world from, the one where it all began. It looked smaller now. I didn't stop. By the time I reached the bottom of the mountain, my breath was smoke and my fingers numb. I walked until the trees thinned and the road came into view, until I could smell exhaust and hear dogs barking from some far-off porch. The town hadn't changed much. Still slow, still tired. Windows with dust that looked like it had settled in from another decade. No one on the street gave me a second glance. I looked like any other mountain woman. Mud on my coat, hair in a braid, eyes half hidden under an old wool hat. I made my way home, or what used to be home. The moment I saw it, my heart stopped. A for sale sign was hammered into the front yard. Big, red, tilted. The grass was dead, the shutters drawn, the curtains gone. I stood there a long time, not moving, not speaking. My name had been scratched out, just like that, like I never lived there. When I opened the mailbox, I wasn't sure what I was expecting. A bill, maybe. A warning from the county. But what I found was something else entirely. A letter, no envelope, just a folded piece of paper, torn at the edge, smudged with what looked like dirt. My name was written on the outside in handwriting I didn't recognize. Inside, just one line. "I've seen you. I know you're not crazy." No signature. Just that. Tucked in between the folds, something soft fell into my palm. A single strand of hair, long, dark brown, coarse. I brought it to my nose. It smelled like wood smoke, like damp moss, like something wild that had once saved me from death. I didn't cry. Not right then. I stood in front of that old house until the sun dipped behind the hill, until my shadow stretched long across the sidewalk, and I felt the wind pick up in the trees behind me. I turned, walked away, didn't look back. I found a room above the old laundromat that still ran Tuesdays and Thursdays. Paid cash to a man who didn't ask questions. I scrubbed the walls clean, unpacked the few things I had left, hung the carved branch above the window, lit a candle beneath it, and I started over. Not because I was ready, but because I owed it to her, and to myself. Every night now I sit by the window with a mug of black coffee in one hand and that letter in the other. And I wait, not for her, for whatever comes next. It started with a knock. Just a soft tap on the door one afternoon, not even strong enough to rattle the glass. I was folding blankets. Donated ones, mismatched. The kind that come in boxes with notes from strangers who still remember what kindness feels like. The center had been up and running for 6 weeks by then. Nothing fancy. Just the old Baptist parlor I'd rented out cheap from a man who liked to be paid in venison jerky and gas cards. I'd cleared the pews, set up tables, borrowed a few chairs from the VFW hall. There was a pot of coffee going all day, and every evening I set out 2 mugs. One for me, one for whoever needed to sit without speaking. That knock came at the tail end of a storm, the kind that hits late summer hard and fast, then leaves the sky pink and mean-looking after. I figured maybe someone had spun out near the curve, maybe a kid wanting to borrow the phone. But when I opened the door, there he was. A boy. Couldn't have been more than 10. Thin, dirty around the fingernails. Big blue backpack slung crooked over one shoulder. His face was pale but not scared. Eyes sharp, like he was looking through me to something else. "Ma'am," he said, polite as anything. "You got any water?" "Course I do," I told him, stepping aside. "Come in out the heat." He nodded once, slipped past me like he'd been raised by his grandmother, careful not to bring in mud. I handed him a cup. He drank like he'd been walking for days, like water was the one thing the world hadn't taken from him yet. I let him finish before I asked anything. "You alone?" He shrugged. "Kinda." I crouched beside him, eye level. "You hungry?" He nodded again. I made him a sandwich, white bread and peanut butter, nothing fancy. He ate like he hadn't seen a real meal in a week. I didn't press. I've learned you don't pull at wounds unless the person's ready to show the scar. After a while, when the silence had settled enough, he looked up from his crusts and asked it. "Do you believe in monsters?" The question landed heavy. I didn't answer right away, just leaned back on the counter and watched him. Then I smiled, slow. "I believe some monsters aren't monsters at all." His eyes narrowed. "Like what?" "Like the kind that live in the woods, the ones folks think they saw once and got scared, so they made up stories. But really, maybe they were just trying to be left alone." He nodded like that made perfect sense. "Did you see one?" he asked. I did. He looked around, like he expected something to crawl from the shadows. "She looked like something pulled from a campfire story," I said. "Big, strong, quiet. But her hands knew how to hold without breaking. Her eyes knew how to listen. And when I was ready to give up, she didn't let me." He went quiet for a minute, fiddling with a thread on his sleeve. Then he said, "My mama used to tell stories like that." I felt the ache creep in, slow and deep. "Where's your mama now?" He didn't answer, just looked down at the floor, like the answer had too many pieces. So I changed the subject, showed him the books on the shelf. Let him pick one. He chose a book of Appalachian folk tales and sat cross-legged in the corner, reading like the world wasn't falling apart around him. I let him stay as long as he wanted. When he finally said he had to go, I gave him a sandwich to take with him. As he stepped out, he turned and said, "You're not like other grown-ups." I smiled again. "Neither are you." Then he was gone. The street outside stretched long and golden, steam still rising from the pavement where the rain had baked it soft. I watched him disappear around the corner, and I swear to you, just before the sky swallowed him, something shifted in the trees. Movement, tall, shadowed, standing still with its hand resting gently on the boy's shoulder. Then they were gone. I don't tell people that part. It's mine, like the carvings on that branch above my window, like the mug I keep set out every night just in case. These days the center's grown. More people come, some with stories, some just looking for someone to listen. I teach them how to recognize phone scams, how to freeze their credit, how to trust their gut again. I show them how to fight back without losing their softness. Every Thursday we do something different. We tell legends. I don't call them that. I just say stories. But the kids come in with their eyes wide, ready to hear about the Cedar Woman, or the Ridge Watchers, or the thing in the trees that walks only at dusk, but never hurts a soul unless it has to. They don't laugh. They don't scoff. They just listen. And every time I tell the story, my story, I make sure they know one thing, that the monster in the woods was the one who saved me when no one else did. That sometimes mercy comes in the shape of something you've been taught to fear. I still light a candle some nights, still carve little symbols into driftwood and leave them by the creek just in case someone's looking. And last week, I found something waiting for me when I came to open the center. A piece of bark, smooth, shaped into a small heart. Carved deep but careful, a snowflake in the center. My hands shook when I picked it up. I turned back toward the trees. Didn't see anything, but I felt it. That old warmth, that old knowing, that old wild mercy. And I pressed my hand to my chest and whispered something I hadn't said in a long, long time. I understand now. Then I hung the heart above the door, so every soul who walks in might feel it too. Not fear, not pity, but the kind of grace that lives past pain, past loss, past the edge of everything we think we understand. The kind you only find when you get lost deep enough to be found again. Some stories aren't meant to be wrapped up with neat little bows. They don't offer answers so much as they offer understanding. They live in the quiet places between what we believe and what we've forgotten, where grief and grace share the same breath, and where the things we fear might just be the things that save us. This story was never about monsters or legends. Not really. It was about what happens when a heart breaks so quietly the world doesn't even notice. About the power of being seen, not judged. About what it means to reach out in the dark and find not punishment, not pity, but presence. Real, wordless, steady presence. Sometimes the smallest act of kindness, leaving a cup of coffee on a stone, lighting a fire for someone else, can ripple through time like a prayer. And sometimes mercy comes not in grand gestures, but in the choice to stay. To sit beside another being and simply be with them in their pain, in their healing, in their silence. This world can be cruel. It can strip the name from your mailbox, the warmth from your bed, the light from your eyes. But even in that cruelty, there are threads of redemption waiting to be pulled through. No matter how lost you are or how far you've wandered, there's a trail back, one stitched from memory, from forgiveness, from the simple belief that life is still worth living, even when it's fallen apart. And maybe that's the truth hidden at the root of all these old stories. Not that there are creatures in the woods, but that there are still miracles walking beside us. Quiet, misunderstood, patient. And if we're lucky enough, or broken enough, or brave enough to meet them, they might just help us remember who we were before the world got too loud. So if this story has stirred something in you, something soft, something forgotten, don't rush past it. Let it sit with you. Let it breathe. And if you've ever needed a sign that you still matter, that it's not too late to begin again, this is it. Thank you for spending time here. If this story touched you, we'd love to hear your thoughts. Please feel free to leave a comment below, share your own experience, or tell us what this story meant to you. Don't forget to like, follow, and subscribe to the channel if you'd like more stories just like this one. Stories that speak not just to the mind, but to the heart. We'll be here always, waiting by the fire,